The promises of God are sure. The prophecies that were laid out in chapter 11 happened exactly as God said they would. And so the prophecies that are yet to come and be fulfilled here in chapter 12 that mimic and mirror some of the things John and Paul wrote in the Gospels and in the epistles, and specifically in the book of Revelation, that those are for sure going to happen as well. And until they do, keep doing business till he comes. Occupy till he comes. And chapter 12, the final chapter of Daniel, it is pretty much exclusively eschatological. It is really a look at end time events. It is in the midst of a vision that Daniel is being given from this angelic or supernatural force or being that's in front of him. We don't really know specifically who it is. They're not named. You could see it as maybe Gabriel or even maybe even Jesus himself. We're not entirely sure. But this being, this person is giving Daniel this vision. It's in the midst of the last piece of it here. And so we open up the book of Daniel, and the first three words are "at that time." And that's because we're in the middle of a vision. And in that vision, Daniel has already been brought to a vision of the end times events. And so that's what he's referring to when he says "at that time." It says, "At that time, Michael, the great prince, who has charge over your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book." So at the time of the end, in Daniel chapter 12 here, it's saying that this will be a time like there has never been. It's going to be increasingly terrible. This echoes the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13 when he's giving the Olivet Discourse, when he's answering questions about the end from his disciples, where Jesus says in Matthew 24:21, "For then there will be a great tribulation, such has not been since the beginning of the world." That echoes that same thought that's projected here by Daniel, that there is a time of trouble coming that there has never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time, your people will be delivered. And your people is speaking of Daniel's people, the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob. And it says, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. Now, all throughout Scripture, and in particular in the book of Revelation, you see the reference to the Lamb's book of life. That's what he's referring to. And just to back up this idea, your people, that concept is echoed in the New Testament, but it's specifically talking about the people of Israel. In the book of Romans, chapters 9 through 11, you see Paul expound on this concept, where he is grieving over the rejection of Christ by his brothers, by the people of Israel. And then in chapter 11, you get to see that God still has a plan for these people. So we're actually going to read through Romans 11 quick and expound on that a little bit. It says, "I say then, has God cast away his people?" Meaning the Israelites? "Certainly not. For I also am an Israelite." This is Paul. "Of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not cast away his people whom he foreknew. Or do you not know what the scripture says of Elijah? How he pleads with God against Israel, saying, 'Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars, and I alone am left, that they seek my life.' But what does the divine response say to him? 'I have reserved myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal.' Even so then, at this present time, there is a remnant according to the election of grace. And if by grace, then it is no longer of works. Otherwise, grace is no longer grace. But if it is of works, it is no longer grace. Otherwise, works is no longer work. What then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the elect have obtained it, and the rest were blinded, just as it is written, God has given them a spirit of stupor, eyes that should not see, and ears that should not hear to this very day. And he's reiterating this point that there is this rejection of the Jewish people, but God is currently saving a remnant of them, as there always will be. And he goes on to continue to say, David says, their table has become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block, a recompense to them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they do not see, and bow down their back always. And so he's saying there's a stumbling block that God has actually intentionally put there. He has this plan for Israel and for the descendants, of whom Paul is one, and he is one of the remnant that has been saved during this time. But he goes on to say that that rejection is not final, that there is a different future plan for the people of Israel. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Certainly not. But through their fall, to provoke them to jealousy, salvation has now come to the Gentiles. Now, if their fall is riches for the world, and their failure riches for the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you, Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify by my ministry. If by any means I provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh, and save some of them. But if their being cast away is the reconciling of the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches are broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them a partaker of the root and fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. But if you do boast, remember that you do not support the root, but the root supports you. This is the concept of the idea that the church, the Gentiles, have been grafted in to the tree, the promise that was given to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The natural branches of that tree, of the promises given to the patriarchs, are the Jews, the natural Israelites. They're the natural branches, and we're the ones grafted in. And Paul warns not to boast against the natural branches. He goes on to say, you will say then, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well said, because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be haughty by fear, for if God did not spare the natural branches, he may not spare you either. Therefore, consider the goodness and severity of God on those who fell. Severity, but towards you, goodness, if you continue in goodness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these, who are natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? And so, if we were able to be saved and grafted into those promises, how much easier would it be for God to graft the natural branches back in? That's the point that Paul is making. And he says, for I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. And so, all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, but concerning the election, they are beloved for the sake of their fathers. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. But for as you were once disobedient to God, yet have now obtained mercy through their disobedience, even so also have now been disobedient, that through mercy shown that you also may obtain mercy. For God has committed them all to disobedience, that he might have mercy on all. And so ultimately, Romans 11 is pointing out this reality that God has a future plan for Israel. And even in their disobedience, God still has a plan for mercy. The Gentiles have been grafted in, but that plan with Israel will come back into fruition when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. And that is part of the reason that I believe that the tribulation period is focused on the nation of Israel. And it's part of the reason I believe that the rapture will take place beforehand. Whether or not I'm wrong on any of those pieces, Romans 11 is pretty clear that Paul's heart is for the natural born Jewish people. And God has a plan for them that Paul himself is a little bit upset that he's not the one to help bring it to fruition. But he knows that it will come, and he speaks it here as prophecy. And so that is ultimately the fulfillment that you see in Daniel chapter 2, where it says, at that time your people shall be, or Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, at that time all your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And he says, your people, speaking of the natural Israelites, the one whom the archangel Michael is the prince over, the nation of Israel. All right, verse 3. So we made it real far already. uh, Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake and come to everlasting life. I'm sorry, that was only verse 1. We're in verse 2 now. Who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So now, speaking of the time of the end, which is sort of reiterated at the end of Revelation with the white throne judgment, there is a judgment where everyone will come and stand before the throne of God, and some will be judged, be given eternal life, some will be judged, given eternal death. This is echoed, by the way, by John in his gospel. In John chapter 5, in verses 28 and 29, he says directly that there is a resurrection unto life and a resurrection unto death, speaking of the final things that are to come. So Daniel echoes that here. Really, John echoes Daniel when he points that out, when Daniel says, many of those who sleep, meaning those who are in the grave, who are in Sheol, shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Verse 3. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Now, I find this really interesting verse because I think a lot of times it's misapplied. Because at the end it says, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And when you isolate that, it sounds like, oh goodness, we've been talking about this for decades now. We're in the information age. Information is ramping up, knowledge is increasing, and technology is increasing. Now, that's all true, but that's not necessarily what Daniel's talking about. What Daniel's talking about is what is connected to the entire verse. The context matters, where he is telling Daniel to seal up the book of prophecy until the time of the end. Meaning, if the prophecy is not understandable until the time of the end, then the knowledge that is increasing is of what the prophecies actually entail, because the book is becoming opened, which is part of the reason that the book of Revelation is called the revelation of Jesus Christ. It is actually the unveiling. Now, the revelation is the unveiling, the unsealing of the end times, of the last days. I mean, in Acts chapter 2, Peter quotes Joel saying that they are in the last days because of the events that are taking place at Pentecost. And so the last days is connected to the church age in general. So we are in the last days. The books have been opened. Knowledge, meaning prophetic knowledge, should be increasing. That is actually made even more understandable in the original language. I mean, da'at is the Hebrew word, which is Hebrew really meaning of wisdom or discernment, or it could also mean general knowledge. But when they translated it from Hebrew into Greek for the Septuagint word is gnosis, which is knowledge concerning faith or uh, moral wisdom, really connected to religious ideals. So it really seems to be the word itself that's used in Hebrew and Greek, as well as the context of the verse, is talking about that Daniel's sealing this book up, but when we get to the end, the knowledge and understanding of the prophecy should increase. So, verse 4 or 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood, one on the bank of the stream, and one on the bank of that stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, he raised his right hand and his left hand towards the heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. Or uh, most think this is reference to a year, a duality of years, or 2 years and half a year, or 3.5 years, which is echoed often through Revelation and other areas. And when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. I heard, but I did not understand. So I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? And he said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. I think it's interesting that it starts out with this sort of reference to those who are going to be written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The way that they are described is that they will be clothing themselves in white because of their wisdom and understanding of these things. Their knowledge should increase towards the end times. And then in Revelation 4, you have the picture of what I think is the church in heaven as the 24 elders, and they're all dressed in white, clothed in white robes, just like is the depiction here, and given crowns, which is also the depiction given to the churches in Revelation 2 and 3 for those who persevere as the church. And they are in heaven when the scroll is opened and the tribulation begins, giving me, furthermore, a reason that I believe that the pre-tribulation rapture is a thing. All right, verse 11. And from that time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1290 days. Now, the abomination which makes desolate was also called the event that Antiochus Epiphanes would perform in the previous chapter during the intertestamental period. Jesus also refers to the abomination of desolation in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21. So a past event should mirror what Antiochus did, which what we talked about last week. He's the guy the Greek ruler who took over Israel, hated the Jews, put lots of them in servitude, murdered a lot of them, sacrificed a pig on the altar, lifted up a statue of Zeus in the holy place, carved his face on it, and then forced them to eat the unclean meat. So that's the picture. Revelation 13 also paints a picture of an image made of the beast that will speak, that people must worship to, which sounds a whole lot like what Antiochus did. He lifted up an image of a false god that had the likeness of his face. And so that should be the type of thing we should expect. And from that moment in the end times, there will be 1290 days. Then it goes on to say in verse 12, Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days. So now it's going to get really fun. So there's 1290 days after the abomination of desolation. And blessed are those who make it to the 1335 days. There's a 45-day difference there. That's weird. You also have time, times, and half a time, a 3.5-year period where these things are taking place. Interestingly, in Revelation 11, you also have a 42-month period where the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is being trampled on by the Gentiles. And then you also have 1260 days where the two witnesses are preaching a message during the end times before they get killed and resurrected and ascend into heaven. And then in Revelation 12, you have a different 1260 days after the abomination of desolation, where it seems like the Jewish people are cast into the wilderness and taken care of in the wilderness for 1260 days. So, to reiterate, in this 7-year period of time, the second half is 3.5 years, time times and half a time, or 42 months, or 1,290 days. But you also have two different sets of 1,260 days, and for some reason, 1,335 days. What does all of this mean? How do all of these numbers get put together? Here we go. Here's the amazing wisdom you came here for. I don't know. All right. My guess, this is a guess. I'm not saying this is a definite, but my guess is that there, one of these numbers, probably the 1,260 days, is maybe potentially speaking of the return of Christ. And then there's a 30-day difference between that and the 1,290 days, and then a 75-day difference between that and the 1,335 days. So my guess is there's probably an amount of time, because it's taking place on earth, where the separation of the sheep and the goats are taking place after his return. And then after that is finished, then there's a period of time to actually set up the kingdom, the millennial kingdom, and deviate who is going to be, adjudicating over certain areas from those who are ruling and reigning with Christ. Because while he's the ultimate leader, he's going to, according to Jude and other references, like some of the stuff that Paul says, we are going to be ruling and reigning with Christ at the end in the millennial kingdom. So if we're given jurisdictions, then it could be the deviation of those different tasks and setting up that government for the millennial kingdom. And that could be the separation of days. That's just a guess. And if that made sense, maybe you can cling to that guess too. If it doesn't make sense, you can say what I say, which is, I don't know, but I trust that God knows, and I know that it'll all work out. And then the last verse of Daniel chapter 12 says, "But, speaking to Daniel, go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days." Which tells me that Daniel, who is beloved of God and who has been faithful and nothing negative is said about him, is one of the people that will be a part of that kingdom. And apparently, he's going to get his place. And it honestly would not surprise me if he had a high ranking job, because he has been a phenomenal, but a phenomenal servant. But what he is told is, go your way until the end. Interestingly, that really echoes something in Luke chapter 19. In Luke chapter 19, Jesus is telling a parable. It's the parable of not the 10 minas. Okay, so in this parable, it says, he called 10 of his servants, delivered to them 10 minas, and said to them, "Do business till I come." Right? That's what Daniel was just told. Go about your business until the end. Jesus says here in this parable that he's teaching about his servants, because the nobleman went into the far country to receive for himself a kingdom and then to return. Jesus ascended into heaven, and he's going to return to bring that kingdom here. And he called 10 of his servants and delivered to them 10 minas and said to them, "Do business till I come. Keep about the mission until I'm back. Occupy till he comes." All right. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him saying, "We will not have this man reign over us." That sounds like the world. And so it was that when he returned, having received the kingdom, he then commanded these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. So the first came saying, "Master, your mina has earned 10 minas." And he said to him, "Well done, good servant, because you were faithful in a very little, have authority over 10 cities." The second came saying, "Master, your mina has earned 5 minas." Likewise, he said to him, "You also will be over 5 cities." And then another came saying, "Master, here is your mina, which I have kept away in a handkerchief. For I feared you, because you are an austere man. You collect what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow." And he said to him, "Out of your own mouth I will judge, you wicked servant." You knew that I was an austere man, collecting what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. And then when you put my money in the bank, that at my coming I might have collected it with interest. And he said to those who stood by, Take the mina from him and give it to him who has 10 minas. But they said to him, Master, he has 10 minas. For I say to you that everyone who has will be given, and from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. But bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, and slay them before me. This seems like a picture of the separation of the sheep and the goats when Christ returns. And he's saying, to those who believe, occupy till he comes. And when he returns and he separates the sheep and the goats, there will be a determination of what we've earned. And that could mean you might have jurisdiction over a city or a state or a nation as Christ reigns the world, or you might end up with a small district in a town, or if you did nothing and you really didn't do anything with the salvation you claimed that you had, and it was really just lip service, maybe something you believed that happened, you believed Jesus came, and you believed he rose from the dead, but you never actually put your faith in him and served him and loved him and followed him, then maybe you're one of those people where Jesus said, I never knew you. And you're kicked out. Or if you're like the world, shaking your fist at God, saying, why isn't everything the way I want it to be? He says, I gave you so many options to know me. I gave you so many options to be filled with the Spirit. And you know what? If you didn't see love from the people that serve me, that's their fault, not mine. I told them to love you. But if you didn't respond to the truth, if you didn't respond to the evidence, if you think you want to be God and you don't want me to be God, then I'll give you your wish. You can be separate from me for eternity. That's what you get. And so that's the picture here. And for Daniel, he's told this book is sealed up. But he's essentially told what we all want to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. He just says, keep doing what you're doing. Because Daniel's doing great. He's doing everything God has asked him to do. And he's promised that he will have his place in the kingdom in the end. I know that that's a gift that I want to. I don't think I'm anywhere near Daniel's caliber. And I would love to talk to him when I get the chance to hear Daniel's life story and to get to meet someone of that kind of great character. But ultimately, the promises of God are sure. The prophecies that were laid out in chapter 11 happened exactly as God said they would. And so the prophecies that are yet to come and be fulfilled here in chapter 12 that mimic and mirror some of the things John and Paul wrote in the Gospels and in the epistles, and specifically in the book of Revelation, that those are for sure going to happen as well. And until they do, keep doing business till he comes. Occupy till he comes and do what he's asked of us. And those things are difficult, but really simple. Love God the most with everything you've got, with your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love others as yourself. Love one another so that it will be known that you are his followers. Take care of the needy. And go and make disciples of all nations. Pretty simple. Occupy till he comes and see what benefits we can reap from the gifts he's given us. Let's pray.